McCarthy with Inside Indiana, coming to you from the very large and very empty United Center here in Chicago. Ohio State and Michigan State just wrapped up their game, so the Big Ten Championship is going to be between Ohio State and the team who beat Indiana here today, Wisconsin. Zach wasn't able to be here today. He's having some weird stomach flu virus type thing, so we wish him well, and we'll see him again at the NCAA tournament where Indiana is. But we'll get to that later. For now, about today's game, IU loses by 12, 68-56. It was their biggest biggest losing deficit of the season, and it was the fewest points Indiana scored all season. And it was the second worst that they've shot from the field. They shot 38.2%, and the only time they shot worse was against, guess who, Wisconsin in Assembly Hall when they lost in January. I think they shot something like 37% against them. It was the 12th time in a row IU's lost to Wisconsin. I mean, they just haven't been able to figure them out in the Crean era. No one on the roster, no one on the coaching staff has beaten them here at Indiana. And again, they're just the Achilles heel for this Indiana team here in the Big Ten semifinals. First half was kind of interesting, just kind of looking at how Wisconsin was able to score how they did. They scored their first 18 points in the paint, and then all of a sudden they just switched gears and just started shooting from the outside quite a bit and scored their next 16 outside the paint, giving them a 34-31 advantage at halftime. There are just so many similarities between this game here and the game we saw in Assembly Hall between IU and Wisconsin. Someone before the game said that there are so many Indiana jerseys, or so many Indiana shirts and apparel here that it seemed like it could be another Assembly Hall North, as they like to call it. And I remember thinking, maybe that's not such a good thing after Wisconsin beat Indiana at Assembly Hall earlier this year. But again, Indiana just couldn't exert their pace like Wisconsin can. I mean, that's Bo Ryan's MO, that's Wisconsin's MO, is that they just force their style of play upon you. They force that methodical, slow developing offense on you where they take 25 seconds off the shot clock, seemingly at least 25 seconds off the shot clock, it seems like every time, which just turns something like an 8-point deficit with 10 minutes to go into more like a 15 or 20, feeling more like a 15 or 20 point deficit, just because it just takes so long between offensive possessions, for Indiana, for opponents against Wisconsin. And you really can't get into much of a rhythm. I mean, Indiana's just such a rhythm-based team. They're so, I don't want to say they're reliant on getting into a rhythm and putting together little runs and stuff like that. But I mean, really, at their best, they're a team that strings together, transition points and a team who really likes to turn their defense into offense. And with the way Wisconsin plays, they don't really allow you to really get out and run on them. I mean, against Michigan, they only allowed 6 fast break points the whole game and 0 in the second half. And then tonight, Indiana wasn't able hardly at all to get out into transition. And so they just really weren't able to play on their strengths very much, and it kind of makes it a half-court game, which isn't, it's not like Indiana's a real weak half-court team, but they're not the lethal scoring threat that they are in the half-court, like they are when they can get a turnover or get running after a defensive rebound or something like that. And so they just weren't able to really break through, and they weren't able to really, out exert, I guess, their style of play on Wisconsin. Wisconsin did a great job of making Cody Zeller and Victor Oladipo fairly inefficient in their scoring. I mean, Zeller was 4 for 10 from the field. He still had a double-double, 13 points and 11 rebounds. And at times he looked like a guy who was ready to take over the game. And then at times, he was getting the ball 15 feet from the basket and wasn't really able to get by Jared Berggren or get inside maybe to really get those high percentage shots that he likes to get. He finishes 4 for 10 from the field, 5 for 7 from the free throw line. He was the only one to go to the line more than 3 times for IU, which was another it's another strength of Indiana's, to get to the line more than their opponents, make more. free throws than their opponents, and they just really weren't able to get to the line that much. I mean, Wisconsin shot 18 free throws, all of which were in the second half, by the way, and Indiana was only able to get to the line 14 times. So there were just kind of a lot of little things that went Wisconsin's way. I mean, they outscored them in the paint by a little bit. They outscored them, or they shot a little bit more free throws than them. They out rebounded them by 5, which was, it's not an enormous margin, but it's just enough to add up all these things, and you get a 12-point win if you're Wisconsin. And then Victor Oladipo, who's one of the top field goal percentage leaders in the Big Ten, shot just 4 of 12 tonight. Scored only 10 points, still finished only 3 rebounds short of his third straight double-double. But he wasn't the dominant, explosive offensive player that he's been a lot this year. And so those Zeller and Oladipo were in double figures, and then Christian Wofford, who fouled out for the only time this year, led the team with 14 points, while Wisconsin really spread it around quite a bit. They had 4 guys in double figures. Ryan Evans, again, like he did in Bloomington, was able to really make a couple shots that kind of left you shaking your head a little bit. I mean, he had that one huge one against IU in that first game where he kind of backed down Oladipo, and then near the end of the shot clock, he hit a turnaround jumper to kind of help seal the deal in Bloomington. And then tonight, again, he was able to. There were a couple of spinning kind of shots that he took and made while Oladipo was guarding him, or while he was guarding him. And he led all scorers with 16 points and 8 rebounds. And then, Jared Berger and Ben Brust, again, had their solid, 11, 12-point nights. Brust was able to hit from outside a couple times. And then Sam Decker, the freshman, who's been coming off the bench all year for Wisconsin, came in, and when IU was down just 1 or 2, about midway through the second half, he was able to really get into a rhythm, and he scored, I think, 7 straight points on his own. And amidst that was something that Yogi Ferrell brought up after the game, or a specific play that Yogi Ferrell brought up after the game, where Decker misses a free throw when Wisconsin's leading by 2. IU can't get the defensive rebound on a free throw, and so it goes back to Wisconsin. Decker hits a 3, then Wisconsin gets a steal, and Decker scores on a layup again. And before you know it, IU goes from down just 2 to being down 7, and it's a deficit they never were able to overcome. They brought it within 1 point again after that, but in the end they ended up losing by 12 here tonight, so they will not be able to, or today. So Indiana will not be in the Big Ten championship game. And there's been some talk, in the press room after the game, kind of speculating as to what this means for Indiana's tournament hopes, in terms of where they play. I mean, they basically already locked up a number 1 seed. I mean, barring something really, really strange and from happening, they'll be a number 1 seed. But the question is, which region will they be in? Are they going to be East, Southeast, or East, Midwest, which they kind of were thinking that they had locked up right now, or are they going to be possibly even in the South? And a lot of it, people reach the conclusion that a lot of it depends on what Louisville does tonight, in just an hour or two, in the Big East championship game against Syracuse. If Louisville is able to win that game, you think maybe they will be able to pass Indiana for the overall number 1 seed and have the Midwest bracket, which kind of, and be placed in the Midwest regional and kind of push Indiana to the East or maybe even the South. But then there are other people who think that, winning the Big Ten outright is just such a big deal in general, and they did win a game in pretty dominant fashion yesterday against Illinois. And so, I mean, just the fact that they won the Big Ten outright, a lot of people think that is enough to give them the overall number 1 seed, with people basically being in agreement that the Big Ten is the top conference in the country. So, winning it outright is just such a huge accomplishment that people think that even if Louisville, who want to share the Big East regular season title, even if they win the Big East tournament title, a lot of people think that still Indiana could be an overall number 1 and could, or be a number 1 where they will be placed in the Midwest bracket. I mean, Gonzaga is also there, but they'll be in the West probably. Um, but that's kind of the big implication of today's loss. I mean, the Big Ten tournament title maybe doesn't mean as much um, to a lot of people as winning the regular season title. So in that sense, maybe this isn't that huge of a loss. But in terms of looking at your NCAA resume, I mean, and that Midwest regional is in Indianapolis, and that would be huge for Indiana, obviously, to be placed there. So we'll see tomorrow night on Selection Sunday, after Michigan State and Ohio State and Wisconsin finish their Big Ten championship game. We're going to see where IU is going to be placed and where all the other Big Ten teams are going to be placed. I will be around. I don't know if Zach's going to be fully recovered by then, or if he is, if he'll be able to make the drive back to Bloomington by then. But we'll definitely have people there at Selection Sunday tomorrow in some capacity. So, stick with us through this weekend, and then obviously we have the NCAA tournament coming up, next weekend for IU. So, for myself, Alex McCarthy, this has been Inside Indiana Overtime, and we will see you very, very shortly. Thanks.